beg to differ. Our relationship with computers has altered fundamentally in the last 30 or so years. Computers have gone from things that fill up entire rooms to things that we wear on our persons. They've gone from being machines that are hugely unaware or mostly unaware of the environment around themselves and each other, to being always on, always aware via a plethora of sensors of everything that's going on around them and with each other. So today, it's not too much of a stretch to say that we are all cyborgs. Not in the sense that we implant ourselves with technology, but in the sense that we expand our abilities via technology beyond their biological limits. So today, we experience and manipulate the world around us with technology. These tools are no longer optional. If they work well, they empower us. If they don't, they enfeeble us. And we get told, you have a choice. You can stop using it. That is not a valid choice. These are becoming essential to living in the modern world. So if these tools are so essential, the question I come back to is who owns them? Who owns these tools by which we live, in a sense? And today the answer is a handful of companies. Apple, Facebook, Google, Twitter. And the common thing between these companies is that they are all closed silos. They are all proprietary. And a subset of these companies has a business model that they share. Facebook, Google, Twitter. The business model of free, as in cost. So what? Free's great. Who doesn't like free here? Who's got a problem with free? Anyone got a problem with free? Yeah? You don't give me anything that's free? No? No one? Wow, okay. In which case, you're the perfect audience for this. I want to tell you about an amazing new product. We are so excited about this. It's called Snail Mail. All right? And I think you're going to love Snail Mail. With Snail Mail, we have solved a very, very important problem. The problem of real mail. That's right. Snail Mail will give you free, real mail forever. Send as many letters as you want, as many packages as you want, to as many people as you want around the world, forever, for free. Who thinks this is great? Who would use Snail Mail? It's kind of cool, right? Free! It's awesome. There is a caveat. A tiny catch. We do open your letters. And we do read them. But we only do this so that we can provide you with helpful hints and suggestions based on what we've understood. We know which might be right, which might be wrong. And then we just pack it all the way back into that little letter, and you wouldn't even know we were there. Who thinks it's a great idea still? Who would use Snail Mail? There's always one. It's like, it's free, I will use it, do whatever you want. Take me. Fine. The rest of you use Gmail, right? Some of you? Now, there might not be a person sitting there at Google reading your emails, but there are algorithms, there are computers doing just that every day. So that's Snail Mail. Do tell your friends. It's at snailmail.com. I think they'll really appreciate it. So why does Google do this? Is Google evil? Is it full of evil people who, have an underground lair and they, sit around and they laugh like maniacs at each other? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so, though. I don't think that's it. It's much simpler than that. You don't need a conspiracy theory when you have the simplicity of business models. It is simply Google's business model to monetize, to make money from your data. That's what they do. So, like the plant Audrey 2 in the musical Little Shop of Horrors, which starts out as a sapling that needs drops of blood to grow and then ends up eating whole human beings, Google needs your data to grow. It is its food. Your information is what it feeds on. And how does it get your data? Via a plethora of methods again. Services. Google started out as a sapling. It started out as a search engine. It was one service. They weren't even tracking you when they started out. They didn't have that business model. They stumbled onto that business model, especially after 9/11 and data retention laws came into play. But today, Google is a very different beast. It has a myriad of services for anything you want to do. So you want to share photos? Well, use Picasa. Put all your photos up there. Will they be analyzing every photo to see who's in it and then trying to match that up to your social graph and seeing who you know and who you don't know and who maybe they've never seen before? Oh, someone's born, let's add them on. Of course they'll be doing that. Why? That's how they make money. Do you want to put your documents somewhere to keep them safe? Put them on Google Drive. Will they be looking through every document you've uploaded there? Yes, of course. Why? That's how they make money. They need data. That's what they feed on. So we said with Gmail, right? Do you want to communicate with your friends? Well, you can use Hangouts, you can use chat. Will they be looking through your chats? Yes, they just bought a company that does just that, right? They'll be doing that. But Gmail, so you might say, like in my first example, you might say, Aral, it's my choice. You know, I am willing to give up a certain amount of my privacy for this free service that I get, and it's my choice. It doesn't hurt anyone else. It's fine. Again, I don't quite agree. Because think about it. What you're saying there is not, I'm okay with Google reading my email. What you're saying there is, I'm okay with Google reading my email and the email of anyone who ever emails me. So you've not just made that decision for yourself. You've also made it for anyone who emails you. And if you're using a custom domain, they may not even know that they're emailing you at Google and that Google's going to be reading it. So in that sense, I think it's far closer to secondhand smoke. So it's not just a selfish decision that you are making. So how else do they get data? Well, there are games. Who's ever used a reCAPTCHA, filled up a reCAPTCHA on a form on a website, right? Yeah, they're very transparent about this. Actually, I think their older site was more transparent. But the way it works is, you have two elements. You have maybe a street sign number, and you have another number that you have to enter. One is something they know. They know this number. They don't know this. Maybe Google Street View, the car was going around and it was taking photos of doors or street signs, and they can't read it. So they want you to help them, and they will help you by keeping your form safe from spam bots, right? So it's kind of a little give and take. But there are also actual games. Has anyone played Ingress? Yeah? Ingress is this game, for those of you that don't know, that takes place in the real world. You walk around the city, and you're in teams, and there's been an alien invasion of some sort, and you're trying to find landmarks, and you're trying to hack into those landmarks and capture them for your team. Which is great until you realize what is actually happening. What's actually happening is, it's a free game that you download. But what Google is getting is very hard to come by data on pedestrian walking patterns. Right? That's hard. They don't have the resources to send X amount of people into a city to find out what's the easiest way to get from landmark 1 to landmark 2. So what do? They send you instead. You are the rablat. The rablat. You are the rablat. Oh my God. If I have a stroke right now, please, you are the lab rat. This is what happens when you get 4 hours of sleep. But you are being used in this way. So it's not free. Also, but at this point you might say, okay, well, you know what, Aral? Okay, that's fine. You've scared me. I'm not going to use any of Google's services. And you might do that. And then they lose. But they can't lose. So what's the next step? Well, they could give you devices, right? Like their beautiful Nexus phones. Who's got a beautiful Nexus phone here? Right? Yeah, they are gorgeous, right? But what is this? Why is this Nexus phone that you have? And it was like half the price of an iPhone when you got it, right? What a deal. That's so cool. How is it half the price of an iPhone? That's a pretty, sophisticated piece of technology. Why is it half the price of an iPhone? Tim Cook is meant to be a supply chain guy. Is he asleep at the wheel? I mean, is he messing up here? Or is it possibly a subsidized device? Is it possibly half the price because what it is really is a beautiful, gorgeous data entry device. Here, buy this and then tell us about yourself and we'll make it even easier, right? Why? Because if you don't like their services, you can stop using their services. if they give you a device, if you buy their device, no matter what service you use, they will still get some information from you. And they can still make it so that the defaults give data to Google. So the same with their Nexus tablets, the same with their laptops. So you might say, my gosh, well that's scary. I'm going to stop using their devices. Fine, they've lost, not fine. So what's the end game? If you need data to live, what is your end game? There's services, there's devices. Your end game is providing connectivity. Because, think about it. If I provide you with your internet connection, it doesn't matter what device you use, I can still get valuable data about you, right? You can use an iPhone as long as you're connected to the internet through me. I can still get valuable data from you, which is exactly what Google is doing with Google Fiber, right? They're providing an unheard of connection in terms of speed. But what's the catch? You sign into it with your Google account. And that's in the so-called developed world. What about the next billion? We keep hearing these Silicon Valley companies talk about the next billion, the next 5 billion. These people in disenfranchised areas who need our help to get on the internet. That's their biggest problem, and Silicon Valley will connect them to the internet for the good of mankind, right? Well, they have Project Loon, which is how Google wants to do it by flying balloons that beam down internet access. Facebook has internet.org, where they're already starting in certain countries to provide internet access. But what kind of internet access with internet.org? They just announced it. It's access to about 10 sites, including things like Wikipedia and women's support sites, etc., that make it Facebook, right? So there might be in the future a whole nation whose only notion of the internet is something that you sign into with your Google username and password or with your Facebook username and password. If this sounds like AOL to you, that's because it is very similar to that. For those of you who don't know what AOL is, so that is data about you. But that's not the only data in the world. There's also data about the world itself. And Google needs that too, of course. Any data. That's what it feeds on. So what do they have? Well, there is Google Earth, right? These beautiful satellite images that they get data from. There's Google Maps. Remember, none of this is public, right? This is all private data that Google's collecting about the world. And then there's Google Street View. And the Google Street View car. Who's familiar with the Google Street View car? Who's seen one? Yeah. And they go around and they get the Street View. But there are places that the Google Street View car cannot go, which is why we have the Google Street View trike, right? But there are places that the trike cannot go, which is why they have the Google Street View snowmobile. And you can't go indoors with a snowmobile, so they have the Google Street View trolley. And if you can't get there with a trolley, by gosh, they have a backpack. They will get there and get that data. Why? It's what they feed on, right? But even though they have the Street View Trekker, there are probably 1 or 2 places that they can't go because you won't let them, right? One of those places is probably your workspace, and the other one is your home. So even if they turned up with their backpack and they knocked on your door, you probably would not let them in. Maybe because of the backpack, I don't know. And I say probably because there was a parody. They shot a video, I think it was in somewhere in continental Europe, and people let them in. They posed as Google Street View and they came in, I think it was in Germany even. And they came into people's homes and people were like, so is this going to be on Google? They're like, yeah it is, just act natural. And people were like, okay. But let's just say that those of you in this room would not let them into your home. Which is why they need you. So how many of you have heard of Google's latest phone project called Project Tango? So Project Tango, nice of you, is a new phone that as you're walking around, it has motion sensors and 3D sensors, so as you're walking around your home, it maps your home in 3 dimensions. And it has object recognition, so it starts recognizing the objects that are in that space, and of course sends all of that information to Google. So again, for the places they cannot get to, they need you. You are the Rablat. I need to work this into my routine. You are the lab rat. Don't come up with things you can't say at all. So, just like Audrey 2 needs blood to grow, companies like Google, companies like Facebook, that give you free services, need your data to grow. It's not a conspiracy theory. It is a business model. And it is the business, in short, of spying on you. That is the business that they are in. The business of free is the business of surveillance. So let's start calling these things by what they really are. Because we have a problem with this in our industry. Even with people who make personal clouds. We just had a summit in Brighton that we organized. And one of the things that we were talking about was, what do we call this? What do we call this? I've been calling it corporate surveillance. But you know what? That's not an accessible term, and I'm sick of using it. Let's call it by what it is. It's a term that already exists, but was coined in a very different era, in the era of personal computing. So this is the first time I'm actually going to use it for this. Let's call it by what it really is. Because what it really is spyware. Google is in the business of spyware. Facebook is in the business of providing spyware. We defined spyware back in the personal computing days as any application you would install that surreptitiously gathered data about you or did things that you didn't want it to. The difference today in our definition is that it's not surreptitious. It may be to the extent that they don't reveal exactly everything that they do or what they use it for, but that is what it is. Google is a purveyor of spyware. Facebook is a purveyor of spyware. Let's call a pair. So, in this system, who are you? You are the quarry being mined. You might have heard you are the product being sold. I prefer the quarry being mined because your data is just raw materials. It's not even what's most valuable about you. What's most valuable about you is when we start to combine those individual data points, those atoms, and we start creating your profile. Your profile, in a sense, is everything but your corporeal self. So think of it as your digital self. If I know so much about you that I can begin to simulate you, that's where things get really interesting. Because I can't take you, your body, and I can't put you in a room somewhere, and I can't run experiments on you, and I can't prod you, and I can't do all sorts of surveillance on you to understand how you work, how you tick, because there are laws against that. That would be kidnapping, right? We have laws that protect our corporeal selves. But what if I can simulate you? What if I can basically create a simulation of you that is everything but your corporeal self? Everything but your body. I can take that. I can put that in my lab. And I can run experiments on it 24/7. Because your digital self, your simulation, has no rights. And that's one of the things that we need to change. We need to get person rights for our profiles, for our digital selves, for our simulations. This is not just a technical problem. This is a problem that involves the political sphere, the legislative sphere, and many other social spheres. This is a social problem. So, to quote Eric Schmidt, we know where you are, we know where you've been, we can more or less know what you're thinking. He's the executive chairman of Google. So that is interesting, as is the fact that I've got the same slides going over and over. It's like an action replay. Don't ever edit your slide deck 5 minutes before a talk. So you might say, so what, Aral? I'm sure that, okay, I'm okay with Google having all of this power, all this control over me. I'm okay with that. Maybe it's some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome. I'm okay with that. I know that they will keep it safe. You know, it just makes me think of the mafia in a sense, right? We'll keep you safe. It's fine. But they don't even do that. Not since 9/11. Because after 9/11, in the US, they founded the Information Awareness Office, right? With the stated aim, publicly stated aim, of gaining total information awareness. Information about everything and everyone. That was their actual logo. I kid you not. Now let me tell you something. If you're going to set up a government agency with the stated aim of knowing everything about everything, do not make that your logo. People get scared with a pyramid with an all-seeing eye shooting laser beams at the world. They get scared. And that's what happened. People got scared. And they went, oh, no, sorry, we didn't really mean it. We'll shut it down. But as the Snowden revelations last year, as they showed, they didn't shut it down, right? What they proved, if nothing else, is that the NSA really needs to hire a PowerPoint designer. It's not acceptable. But apart from that, we found out that they had not shut it down. That all of the companies that we trusted with our private data, with, granted, no basis for trusting them with it in the first place, had been sharing it with the US government and subsequently, we found out, with other governments as well. Now, there's one more thing about this slide. I'm sorry to make you look at it for any longer than necessary, but there is something that I think we should all recognize because it doesn't happen very often, and I think, credit where credit is due. Microsoft was the first at something. Just saying, doesn't happen every day. What were they sharing? Everything. Everything that we thought was private. Because what we've done is we bastardized the meaning of private. Private used to mean for you alone. Today, if you were to ask Facebook or Google what private means, they would tell you it means just between us. There is not the option of for you alone anymore. And that's a very key difference and something that we need to regain. So why did this happen? Well, quite simply because it's so much easier for governments to ask corporations for information that you have voluntarily given them than it is to come to your door, come to your house and try and gather that data, that information themselves. To do that, they need court orders. To do that, they need the judicial system. That is expensive, if nothing else. They need to drive around. That's expensive. Whereas asking a corporation, that's just pennies on the person. We need to make it expensive again. So Bruce Schneier, who's a security researcher, has a great quote on this. He said, the NSA didn't wake up and say, let's just spy on everybody. They looked up and said, well, corporations are spying on everybody. Let's get ourselves a copy. So whenever you hear these corporations, Google, Facebook, joining privacy initiatives, which we let them join because we were naive, and we let them legitimize themselves as a leading voice in this debate, whereas they are the perpetrators. Whenever you hear them say, like, oh, look at the government, look at what the government's doing, the government's horrible. Yeah, what the government is doing is horrible, but what they're doing is exactly the same thing. That is called misdirection, and that's what they're practicing. So I guess, though, at least the people who run these companies must be aware of the huge amount of responsibility that they have on their shoulders. So let's hear from Eric Schmidt again. He says, there's been surveillance for years. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. It's the nature of our society. Not that. Now you might think, Eric, you're just saying that. But I know Eric. And Eric is a stand-up guy. He didn't just say this, right? He wanted to prove to the world that this is true. So after he said it, he went out and he created several websites. And onto those websites, he uploaded his own personal photos, his own personal videos, just to make this point. So some of my favorites are ericstoiletantics.com. It's it's not my thing, but there's Eric's favorite sexytimes.com. Some very interesting videos. He's an interesting character. And my favorite, though, is Eric's masturbationadventure.com. Now, these sites don't exist, and nor should they if there are any developers in there. Because privacy is not about whether you have something to hide. Privacy is about having control over what you want to share and what you want to keep to yourself. The problem in a world without privacy, the problem is that anything that you want to keep private in a world where public is the default has an association of guilt attached. And that's a huge problem. Why do you want to not tell me what you were doing last night at 11 p.m. in your room? What do you have to hide? Are you a deviant? Should we be worried about you? That's a world without privacy. There's a reason why privacy is a fundamental human right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Article 12. Privacy is a prerequisite for our other fundamental freedoms, our civil liberties, and a prerequisite for democracy. So with their business model of spyware, Google, Facebook, etc., are emerging as threats, not only to our civil liberties, but to democracy itself. So yes, free is a lie. It's a lie because it's a concealed barter. There's an exchange going on, but it's in the interest of one of the parties to hide the exact nature and scope of that exchange. So it's really more than that. It's a con. It's a confidence trick. By its very definition, an act of cheating or tricking someone by gaining their trust and persuading them to believe something that is not true. Come onto our platforms, they're free, right? No, they're not. We're taking something very valuable away from you. And just to see how they approach it, Michael Novak, product manager at Facebook, recently said, now we're thinking about privacy as a set of experiences that help people feel comfortable. Comfortable with what? The fact that they don't have privacy. In other words, a con. But maybe it's even worse than a con, because what we're talking about is a monopoly. Google itself, you could possibly argue it's a monopoly. I'm not going to. Let's say Google isn't. Let's say Facebook isn't. Let's say Yahoo isn't. But what happens when the only alternatives you have all share the same business model? So you leave Google for Yahoo. How do they make money? By monetizing your data by spyware. LinkedIn, how do they make their money? Spyware. Snapchat, do you think they erase your images, your photos? No, they don't. They erase it off of your phone. Not theirs. Basically, look at it and analyze it. Why? That's how they will make their money. Spyware. So what happens when you don't actually have an alternative in the business model? You have a monopoly of the business model. And that's what's so dangerous. And what's worse is we have this amazing culture, the startup culture, right? You guys, any of you live in London, Silicon Roundabout, yeah, startup culture, it's great, right? What's a startup? A startup is one of those little pods that wants to be like the mother plant, or wants to be eaten by the mother plant. That is what we worship today in Silicon Valley, and what we are exporting to the UK and to Europe. Here's an example. Have you seen Spritz? Has anyone seen Spritz? It's a new way of reading. Some of you have, right? It's really cool. I mean, when I saw it, I was floored. Read that. Just look at that. You are reading at 250 words a minute, just by looking at that one word. It's pretty cool, huh? That's really awesome. Now, Spritz is not something you buy. It's a new company, but you don't buy the Spritz app. It's free. And if you're a developer, you can embed the Spritz SDK into your own applications, the software development kit. It's free. Why is it free? Why is it free for developers to use? This is awesome. They can make some money from this, right? They get to see what you're reading. So the CEO of Spritz was speaking at the same conference as me, and went on beforehand at Thinking Digital this year. And he said, we really want you guys to use this in your apps, you know? Maybe make some email apps or something. Yeah. But what's worse, he also gave another example. He said, we don't have the science. I love this science. We don't have the science to back this up. But in our empirical research, we found that this way of reading is really great for people with dyslexia. So let's take him at his word. Let's say they have the science. That this, which has fundamentally altered our way of reading for the first time maybe in history, right? This new technology has the possibility of allowing people who have dyslexia to read as well as anyone else, right? What is he actually saying? What is the choice that he is giving them? He's telling them, either read badly or let us watch what you're reading. I think we can do better than this. I think humanity deserves better than this myopic vision of technology that we are harboring ourselves in. Another example, you've heard of the Internet of Things, right? It's very exciting. Like everything's going to be connected to the internet. That's so cool. Like Nest, the Nest thermostat, have you seen that? It's like, it knows like when you're there and it adjusts it. It knows when you're not home and it adjusts it. And Google buys it because, you know, they want to know when you're home and when you're not. And that happens in January of this year, right? And then Nest goes, customer data will only be used for Nest products and services, won't be shared with Google. That's totally okay, don't worry about it. And then there's this company, Dropcam, which, you know, is a camera that you put in your home to monitor your home, monitor your children, etc. And then Google's Nest, which is now Google Nest, buys Dropcam, right? And then the founder says, the Nest family is growing, you know, that's really great. Nest customer data, like Nest customer data, Dropcam will come under Nest's privacy policy. We won't share all of your images of your homes with Google, although we're owned by Google. We're kind of Google, but we're not Google. And then, a few days later, Nest to share user information with Google for the first time. Nice. So it is this monopoly, can I say it at the end? It is this monopoly of the free business model that is leading us down a path that I call digital feudalism. It's a new feudalism. It's a feudalism where we don't have alternatives. And the lack of alternatives is the main problem. But that is the problem. And if you want to learn more about the problem, there's a great documentary called Terms and Conditions May Apply, which is very accessible, very non-technical, that I would definitely encourage you to share with your friends as well. But if we leave it here, it's a very depressing place to leave it. Thanks, Aral. The world sucks. I'm going to go enjoy something else somewhere now. What is the alternative? There are alternatives. And the alternative, of course, is open, right? Open source, you've heard of it? It's not. Open is such a diluted word that I have no idea what anyone's talking about when they use it today. Open can mean anything from closed to open. And what it definitely doesn't mean is what we think it means, which is that it preserves or protects or perpetuates freedom. There is a word for that. It's free. Now you might be thinking, WTF? Made that PG-13. Free, but you just spent the last half an hour telling us that free is a lie and free is horrible. No, the English language is a bit screwed up. As you know, we have two meanings overloaded into the same word. Free as in cost, which is bad. Free as in liberty, which is good. Right? Free as in freedom. And creating free alternatives, it's so easy. I don't know why all of us aren't doing it. 3 steps and then we'll all be doing it, okay? It's so easy. It's just, wow. Number 1, clone the Git repository. Yeah, you with me? Of a Facebook alternative, right? And then configure and deploy it to your own server. We all know how to do this, right? Yeah. I was just doing that 5 minutes ago before. And then the best part, just ask all of your friends and family and everyone to do the same thing. It's not easy. And that's the biggest problem we have. Something might be free, and yet closed to certain audiences. Which audiences? Anyone who's not an enthusiast. And the problem is one of user experience, So take a look at Firefox OS, for example. Who's heard of Firefox OS? It's the alternative by the darling of the open world, right? Mozilla. And there are lots of people from Mozilla who I love. And there are lots of people there working for the betterment of technology and of society. But let's look at what the current model creates. Firefox OS. So I got one of these phones when it first came out. I've got, I think, 2 now and one of the newer ones on the way because I am constantly evaluating it. And what I do is I live with this technology for a week. I don't look at the ideology, I don't look at the feature spec list somewhere. I live with it and I see whether it empowers me or it enfeebles me. So how did Firefox OS do in my week of living with it? This was its hello. Can you set the date for me? That's a very rude hello, right? If you met someone on the street and they said, what year is it? Unless they happen to be some, unless they happen to be some burly German dude from the future, in which case, you're screwed anyway. That's rude. And for goodness sake, why? Look at that, 1980, that's where it starts. Nobody bought this phone in 1980. Why are you making me scroll through over 30 years to get to where I need to be? Why are you even asking me the date? We have ways of finding out what the date is today by connecting to the internet. This was a valid error message. I regret to inform you that it was a game that I never successfully completed. This is me sending a direct message to my girlfriend. Now, if you can't see what I'm typing, that's okay. Because neither could I. The keyboard is covering what I'm typing. And finally, this was probably the worst experience I had with it. This is the Train Times website not displaying properly on the phone, which meant that I went to London Bridge Station not knowing that every train was cancelled, which in and of itself just blows my mind. It's a train station. But it did mean that I lost 2 hours, which could have been 2 hours that I had to spend with my girlfriend, that I had to spend with my dog. 2 hours that I will never get back. Because that is that is the effect of the things that we make as designers and as developers. Either they empower people or they enfeeble people. Either they give them great experiences, and if you think about it, experiences are all we have in life. Our lives are a string of experiences. Good ones, bad ones, collect them all at the end, and that is the quality of your life. And whether it's with people or with things, those experiences matter. It is arrogant to create something like this and then to tell people to use it just because it protects them in some way, which Firefox OS doesn't. It doesn't solve that problem. And we are arrogant in the free and open world. We say, do not worry about your experience right now, because it's good long term. We can't say that. The other guys, they say, we're going to provide you with great experiences now. We're going to screw you in the future. We can't say that. We need something new. We can't just design for the here and now. We can't just design for the future. We need to design for both simultaneously. We need to design for the whole term. And there's another problem with Mozilla. Who do you think gives Mozilla 90% of its money? Where do you think Mozilla gets 90% of its revenue from? Bingo! So I have a feeling that the revolution is not going to be sponsored by the people that we're revolting against.